Have you heard about the bottomless pit that mysteriously appeared on the property of an American named Mel Waters? In 1997, he talked about it on the popular American talk show Coast to Coast. This message was the starting point for the mystical story I want to share with you today. Are you ready to find out what Mel's hole is hiding and why the world is shocked by this video? Alright, let's go. 21. On February 1997, Art Bell, host of the popular late-night show Coast to Coast, was taking calls from his listeners. They were on air discussing mysterious events and phenomena that modern science still couldn't explain. At the peak of the show's popularity, it had an audience of about 15 million people, many of whom regularly shared their stories about paranormal phenomena and conspiracy theories. But that night, an unusual call came in. A man who introduced himself as Mel Waters shared a story that literally shook Art Bell and everyone listening to the show. This story continues to spark debates even years after it aired. Mel Waters claimed that he owns a piece of land about 9 miles west of the city of Ellensburg, in Kittitas County, Washington. He reported that there was a mysterious hole on his property, the depth of which remained unknown. Mel Waters' story is preserved in the recording of the talk show, so I'm sharing it almost word for word. The story is really mind-blowing. Here's what Mel said. Good afternoon. I'd like to ask you and your many listeners for some advice. I live in the rural area of eastern Washington, not far from the Monastash Ridge. There's an unusual pit on our land. At first, I thought it was some kind of old well about 10 feet in diameter. The walls of the pit are reinforced with stones, and a metal lid is installed on top of it to prevent accidents. One day, I noticed that when you shout into the hole, there's no echo. Moreover, when my wife and I decided to drop something in there to figure out how deep it was, we didn't hear anything. No sound of it hitting the bottom, no echo. What's more, when my wife and I decided to drop something in there to figure out how deep this hole was, we didn't hear a thing. No sound of it hitting the bottom, no echo. This piqued my curiosity, and I decided to try to find out just how deep this pit was. I tried different methods, but I still couldn't reach the bottom. Strangely enough, besides the lack of a bottom, there are two other things that worry me. Our dogs refuse to go any closer to the hole than 100 feet, and the birds avoid landing on the edge of the pit or the cover. I'd love to hear your listeners' opinions on this. Maybe they can come up with some hypotheses about the nature of this phenomenon. I'm also curious if this pit could be one of the deepest on the planet. Mel Waters. After that, Waters kept calling into the radio show. The man made 5 calls between 1997 and 2002. And each news story he told was more unbelievable than the last. After the 5th call, Mel Waters disappeared for good. But what did he talk about during his calls? When Mel dropped heavy tools into the pit and heard no splashes or sounds, he pondered the phenomenon. He suspected the pit might be filled with liquid mud, explaining the silence. To test this, Mel tied candies to a fishing line and lowered them into the well. If water was present, the sweets would dissolve. The line reached about 1,640 feet. If there was water down there, the candies should have dissolved. The line ended at about 1,640 feet. However, when Mel pulled it back up, the candies were still intact. So he decided to get more fishing line and attached a lead weight to the end of it. Gradually, spool by spool, he lowered the line deeper, but nothing happened. The pit kept swallowing the line without any signs of reaching the bottom. After a while, Mel stopped his experiments, realizing that he had lowered over 78,700 feet of line into the pit but still hadn't reached the bottom. Not knowing what to do next, Mel reached out to Art Bell for help. The host suggested lowering someone into the pit using pulleys. However, Mel immediately dismissed that idea, thinking it was way too risky. He explained that the strange events happening around the pit indicated danger. There could be toxic gases there, and the high pressure could crush any daredevil who decided to descend. Even though a volunteer later called him, ready to take part in such an experiment, Mel turned down the idea, not wanting to take responsibility for any possible consequences. He admitted that he would have been willing to jump into the pit himself if he had been diagnosed with a terminal illness. He believed that the forces hidden in that pit could change his fate. At the same time, he admitted that he himself would be ready to jump into a hole if he were diagnosed with a fatal disease. He believed that the forces hidden in that pit could change his fate. Interest in this mysterious phenomenon kept growing, and calls from listeners kept coming in even at night. Mel's story became the main topic of the evening and stayed one of the most popular subjects on the show for a long time, from coast to coast. 4 days after the first call, Mel was back on the radio show, telling Art Bell that the day after the broadcast, he returned to his estate in Monastash. To his surprise, Mel found that the access to his property was blocked by military personnel in yellow suits, who refused to let him onto his own land. Despite this, Mel noted that there were no signs of fire or debris visible nearby. Instead, he observed people in yellow gear, presumably wearing chemical protection suits, moving around his property. When Mel demanded to see the person in charge, he was told the same version of events. The military said the property may not belong to Mel and hinted at the possibility of a drug lab being found on the property. Mel threatened to bring in the press, but the soldier just smirked, saying that no one would believe him anyway. Bell immediately invited Mel back for another appearance on the show. He asked if there had been any changes in the situation with the military and whether Mel had taken any pictures of the pit. Mel answered negatively, but clarified that he and his neighbors witnessed the military throw a camera into the pit, after which they became confused. The military saw something so unbelievable that they immediately prohibited anyone from approaching the pit and the property. Mel also heard the people in yellow exchanging remarks, discussing what they saw on the camera. They mentioned some strange object and a mysterious creature. Later, the man noticed a powerful beam of light shooting out of the pit, like a spotlight aimed at the sky. This beam seemed endless, but instead of emitting light, it, on the contrary, absorbed it. What was hidden in that pit, Mel never figured out. Before wrapping up the meeting, the viewers were reminded that the area where Mel's property was located is known for UFO sightings and other strange occurrences. UFO experts claim that there are incidents that can't be explained by logical methods. Reports are coming in from various sources, ranging from military personnel to commercial pilots. Recently, UFO research was included in the new defense budget of the United States. Mel's story sparked a lot of interest among the show's viewers, and everyone was hoping he would come back to continue sharing his adventures. It took a full 3 years before Mel made another appearance on the show. He didn't call to share any news about his property and the bottomless pit. It seemed like he had vanished without a trace. However, in 2000, Art Bell managed to track him down and invited him onto the show. The host asked Mel to repeat his previous story about the mysterious pit to make sure he remembered all the details. Mel shared his story and revealed a new, completely unbelievable mystery. It turns out that some people offered him $250,000 a month for the indefinite right to lease his property. The only condition was that he take the money, never speak of the pit again, and move away. Mel agreed and moved to Australia. When Art asked why Mel had been out of touch for so long and hadn't called from Australia, he shared a chilling story. In December 1999, when he was about to appear on the show, Mel was helping his nephew move into a new apartment in Olympia. He left his truck in a small town and took a bus to Olympia. That's when something strange happened. The bus was stopped by transportation officials supposedly due to a conflict between passengers. All the passengers were transferred to another bus, and that's when everything started. About 12 days later, Mel woke up in a dirty alley in San Francisco. All his personal belongings were gone, and he found a mark on his arm from an .4 drip. His front teeth were knocked out. In a panic, Mel got in touch with his nephew, who bought him tickets back to Olympia. A few days after his return, Mel found out that he was being sued. The plaintiff was his ex-wife, who actually owned the property. She accused him of violating the terms of the lease agreement. Among the violations were the construction of underground fuel systems, a septic tank, and paved roads. Mel insisted that he hadn't done anything like that, but he allowed for the possibility that it could have been done by the government. The most thrilling part of Mel's story was an ordinary dime. In San Francisco, Mel noticed his unique handmade belt buckle was missing. It was crafted from a bent fork, stones, and coins. Mel had made 10 such buckles, each using 10 Franklin Delano Roosevelt coins found in a mysterious red Chinese envelope of lucky money. Mel created 10 of these buckles using 10 Franklin Delano Roosevelt coins each that he found in a mysterious red Chinese lucky money envelope. Mullah was puzzled by the fact that someone had stolen his belt. So he began investigating and found the man to whom he had sold one of his unique belts. While examining the coins on his belt, Mel noticed a dime dated 1943. However, the coins featuring Roosevelt didn't start being minted until after his death in 1946. Moreover, every American coin has a letter indicating where it was minted. This particular coin had the letter B on it, even though no American mint has ever started with that letter. This seemed quite unusual, so Mel sent the coin to an expert for evaluation. However, A few days later, the specialists reported that the coin had been seized by the Treasury. Later, Richard Hoagland, a theoretical physicist and well-known researcher of extraterrestrial civilizations, suggested that such coins might have come from a parallel world. If these coins found near Mel's pit really came from another dimension, does that mean the pit itself is some kind of portal to another space? During a phone call to the Mel Waters radio show, a resident of Ellensburg, Washington, located about 18.5 miles from his property, told host Art Bell that he bought the land a few years ago, and the mysterious pit was already there at that time. He shared an incredible story about his neighbor. When his dog died, instead of burying it the traditional way, he decided to take advantage of the convenient pit and just toss the animal's body in there. A few days later, a hunter spotted that very dog, alive and well, running through the woods. Mel's neighbor was absolutely sure that it was his pet, since he was able to recognize the collar. However, the dog didn't respond at all to its owner's attempts to call it back, just kept running away as if it were on a hunt. What is this? Is it just the imagination of a pet owner missing their furry friend, or is it something real? I wouldn't jump to conclusions if I were you, because things start happening in Mel's life that would surprise even the skeptics. Mel Waters returned to the Art Bell Show several times, first in 1997, then in 2000, and twice in 2002. Waters claimed that after he began publicly discussing the hole on his property, his wife suddenly divorced him and his land mysteriously disappeared from satellite maps. He also talked about his visit to a Basque settlement in Nevada, where he came across another pit with mystical properties. Like the first one, this pit seemed bottomless, and animals stayed away from it. During experiments with this second pit, the Basques lowered a bucket of ice into it. Like the first, this hole seemed bottomless, and animals avoided approaching it. During the experiments with this second pit, the Basques lowered a bucket of ice into it. It turned out that the pit transformed the ice into a warm, easily flammable substance that didn't melt but could burn for months. What? The most shocking claim from Waters was about an experiment conducted in collaboration with the Basques. They decided to drop a sheep into the pit to see what would happen to a living creature that ended up in there. When they pulled the animal back up, it was dead but had a huge, pulsating tumor. When they opened the tumor, they found a creature about 18 inches long, resembling a seal but with surprisingly human-like eyes. Waters said that the creature looked at him with deep sympathy. After that, the Basques put the creature back into the pit. Mel Waters' last report for the show Coast to Coast was in December 2002. He reported that the authorities found out about the second pit, removed the burning ice, and that he felt like he was being watched. He also claimed that the Basques told him the creature visited their village several times after it was returned to the pit, supposedly warning them about the danger of the burning ice. This call was the last message from Mel Waters. He stopped using any means of communication and just vanished. So what exactly was Mel's pit? Was it a secret military development or a time travel gateway? Maybe it was a passage to another dimension. Maybe the answers to these questions will remain an eternal mystery for us. There are places all around the world that challenge logic, make us rethink our understanding, and spark our imagination. Whether to believe or not, that's up to each person to decide for themselves. Hey friends, I have an interesting offer for you. You have a unique opportunity to become part of our team. If you have video editing skills, can voice over videos in Russian, English, and other languages, or write interesting scripts, we'd love to work with you. Just message our Telegram bot. We'd be happy to work with you. Message our Telegram bot. The link is in the description. And that's all for today. See you soon.